Si l'Écosse est le plus grand producteur de whisky, les États-Unis ont aussi de belles choses à offrir. C'est essentiellement dans les régions du Tennessee et du Kentucky que l'on trouve la majorité des grandes distilleries américaines. Pour mon second épisode du Monde du Whisky, je me suis intéressé aux micros-distilleries. En effet, depuis 2010, ces petites productions connaissent un essor important. C'est du côté de Portland, Oregon, que nous allons découvrir quelques distilleries qui fabriquent des petites quantités de whisky, comme ici Bull Run, et leur gamme de whisky tempérance. La plupart ne possèdent qu'un seul alambic.
We grew up on the wrong side of the river, and our childhood has gone on for way too long.
Commençons par découvrir emmène. Il s'agit d'une entreprise qui produit de la bière, du vin et différents alcools forts, mais qui possède aussi des restaurants, des bars et des hôtels. Il existe 2 sites autour de Portland. Le premier, Edgefield Distillery à Troutdale, rassemble toutes les activités de emmène. Mon attention se porte bien sûr sur la petite maison qui abrite l'unique pot still ou alambic charentais. Ce type d'alambic a été conçu à Cognac pour produire la célèbre liqueur. Il est très répandu dans la distillation du whisky. À Edgefield, on fabrique le White Dog et le Hog's Head. Hog's Head, qui signifie tête de sanglier, désigne un tonneau de grand volume dans lequel le whisky ne prend que très peu le goût du bois.
So here is the still that you got, right?
Yes.
Is the only one?
Yes, this is our one still, Holstein pot still, made by the Bavarian Holstein partners of Germany, the world's oldest still manufacturers. Very common still to see in this type of distillery, artisan pot still. Very, very versatile piece of equipment. We make 12 different products through this one still. But 95% of the time we are making whiskey in here. Whiskey is our number one selling product by far, and it's also what takes the longest for us to make. It essentially takes 4 years or so to make a single bottle of whiskey. Our whiskey's 100% malted barley. We make a whiskey wash down in the brewery, which is basically unhopped flat beer that we bring up here, about 1,700 gallons at a time. Distill it twice and end up with about 212 gallons of alcohol, which is sort of our magic number that fits for 53-gallon brand new American white oak barrels, aged 4 years. 3 distinct recipes blended together into one bottle of whiskey. Craft whiskey, craft distilleries in particular have really become popular in Oregon State and Washington State recently, and it's sort of followed on the heels of the craft brewing boom up here. Oregon and Washington have long been known for their wines and more recently their beers. And distilling on this level is simply taking those same craft wines and distilling it into brandy, and taking that same craft beer and distilling it into whiskey. So with drinking locally and all of that stuff that's happening, people are really starting to seek out craft spirits now more than ever. Washington State recently changed their laws to allow for craft distilleries to open, so there's been a huge boom there. Really, the Pacific Northwest in general is sort of the U.S. hub for this type of distillation. Just the ingredients to make this stuff is already here. The beer is already here to make the whiskey out of, the wine's already here to make the brandy out of. So we're seeing a lot of that these days, a lot more of it than there has ever been. When we first started distilling up here 16 years ago, it was really unique to the area to have a craft distillery, and now it's pretty commonplace actually. We'll go to distillery festivals and tastings where there will be 50 or more local distilleries making very, very good stuff. The technology is there, the equipment is there, and there's finally enough skilled people now to be able to produce really, really good stuff out of a really small space and a really small still. So.
Aux États-Unis, le whisky s'écrit avec un E. Les Américains produisent plusieurs types de whisky. Nous trouverons du whisky de Malte, comme ce qui se fait en Écosse, ce que l'on appelle un whisky pur Malte, mais aussi du whisky de seigle, le rye, ou encore du whisky de blé, wheat, et de maïs, corn. Les Américains aiment les mélanges de céréales, et il n'est pas rare de trouver un whisky qui en mélange 2, 3, voire 4 types différents dans des proportions très précises.
It's all the same.
Allons maintenant visiter la seconde distillerie de McMenamins, la Cornelius Pass Roadhouse Distillery. C'est ici qu'est produit le Billy Whisky, de 2 ou 3 ans d'âge, vieilli dans des fûts de chêne tout neufs. Cette bouteille est rare, puisqu'on ne peut l'acheter que sur les sites des distilleries elles-mêmes. Ici encore, nous ne trouverons qu'un seul pot still, une pièce magnifique rapportée de France.
Well, we're distilling today. We're distilling apple brandy, but we do several brandies and also whiskey and gin with this still that was made in France in the 1890s. It's a Charentais Alembic still, designed for cognac, and like I say, we don't follow rules, so we're making gin and whiskey and rum and brandy. It's all hand-pounded copper. It's got a naked flame underneath the pot. See, I'm already off track. You need to edit this.
yeah, that's fine.
Let's see, still basically, we have a natural gas fire under the pot. We heat it up and vapors will rise up and over the swan neck. They'll pass through this preheater to preheat the next batch. They continue over to the condenser, have a serpentine coil in there. So the vapors recondense back into a liquid and we collect them here. Out of a 165-gallon batch, we'll usually collect about 45 to 50 gallons at around 30% the first time through the still. We combine 3 batches or 4 batches, enough to fill the still back up, run it a second time, and we'll end up collecting about 45 gallons at around 70 to 72% alcohol.
Okay.
And then that will eventually end up in a barrel, aging for several years. In the case of brandies, somewhere between 3 and 7 years, and then it will be blended and bottled.
Okay, and for the Billy whiskey?
Billy whiskey is primarily a wheat-based mash. We do our mashes right here. We ferment the wash in this same building. Follow the same kind of double distillation pattern, and then it ends up in a charred, never before used white American oak barrel for around 3 years, and then we bottle it.
De manière très régulière, l'alambic doit être nettoyé avant de commencer une nouvelle distillation.
I could cry, but I won't. Follow me, she said as she started to run. And I watched on as the rain came down. Hint in her smile, glint in her eye. A little look, she's gone.
C'est à Portland que se trouve la majorité des distilleries d'Oregon. Quelques-unes sont concentrées dans le même quartier, l'East Side, et l'on peut passer d'une à l'autre simplement en marchant. Lorsque j'arrive à la distillerie House Spirit, j'ai pu assister à la mise en bouteille de leur malt whisky, le Westward, vieilli en small batch. Les small batch sont des tonneaux de petite dimension, ce qui permet à l'alcool d'être plus en contact avec le bois et d'y prendre plus de saveur.
The distillery opened in 2004. This is now our 10th year distilling. Known primarily for doing aviation American gin, but 2 years ago, December 2012, we came out with Westward Whiskey. It's a single malt all barley whiskey that we ferment with an ale yeast. We double pot distill it, and then we put it in new American white oak barrels that have been charred for 2 years, 7 months to 3 years, depending on how long we think it needs to go. So the whiskeys are generally a newer product. We're doing it single barrel as well. So each bottle has the barrel number that it came from. If you had a bottle from barrel number 5 and a bottle from barrel number 3, they might taste slightly different, just depending on the wood and where they were in the room during the aging process. But generally they have the same flavor profile. Really nice barley characteristics since it is a single malt. You get a really nice kind of vanilla caramel flavor coming off the nose because of the barrel. Depending on the barrel too, some are a little more spicy than others, some are a little more bourbony, it just kind of depends. But generally they're all great sipping whiskeys, and we bottle them at 90 proof.
Woman, do I know you? There's something familiar, but your eyes are not blue. Your skin is not white. Woman, I'm not looking for love. I'm not looking for change. Just a place to lay down for an hour or a lifetime. Woman, the skin hangs from your bones, and we're pale as two stones from the vomit of me and the vice of regret. But woman, if I ask for a kiss, would our blood run free in ecstasy? And in the wind and the rain, la la la, 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 la la la,
Allons, quelques rues plus loin, visiter la distillerie Eastside. Ici sont produits du rhum, de la vodka, des whiskies et autres liqueurs de fruits.
Hot still on it if we run around whiskey or rum through. We've been around since 2008. Started off doing rum because rum's a little simpler, a little easier. Moved into some flavored rums, and then we eventually moved into whiskey and vodka. What is bourbon?
Yep.
Bourbon, by federal regulation, has to be at least 51% corn. The mash has to be 51% corn. It has to be aged in brand new American white oak barrels. For it to be a straight bourbon whiskey, which is what this is, it has to be a minimum of 4 years old. Our mash is about 75% corn, 10% wheat, and 15% barley. For me, I wanted something with a little higher corn because I wanted something a little smoother with a little bit of spice, but not too much kick to it. So this is pretty much a standard American bourbon, 4 years old, like I just mentioned. This is our Oregon oaked bourbon. And what we do is we take the bourbon out of the barrel where it's been sitting for 4 years. Then we put it in heavy charred Oregon oak barrels, and we let it sit for anywhere from 30 to 60 days. So it's kind of a re-aging, or maybe putting a finish on it. And the reason we do that is if you look at the chemical profiles of American oak and compare them, which is generally grown down south, and look at American oak, the chemical profile is quite a bit different. And so this adds a lot more vanilla. The heavy char adds a little smokiness. So while this doesn't taste like a scotch, it takes the whiskey a little bit more that direction. It smooths it out, adds a little smokiness, adds more complexity and character to it.
Toujours dans le même quartier, je découvre la distillerie New Deal, qui vient tout juste de lancer son premier whisky, le Unaged Rye White Dog Whisky, et qui nous prépare un autre whisky d'un type très original, puisque le mélange à base d'orge est aussi composé de canne à sucre, ce qui est utilisé pour faire le rhum.
So here at New Deal, we have 4 different stills. We've been here for 10 years. This is one of the original pot stills Tom had custom made. And then we've had this beautiful one for the last 2 years. This big Carl from Germany. We're New Deal Distillery. Been in Portland for 10 years. First distillery to make vodka. But Tom, our distiller, has been working on whiskey for the last 3 to 4 years. We have them aging throughout the building. And we're basically just ready to bottle at any time now, just waiting on regulations. But the whiskey's been maturing. We have bourbon whiskey, some rye whiskey. We have some smoked single malts coming. And maybe some surprise Portland blends coming as well. So should be available at any time. The whiskey's been made on, so we have several different pot stills, but we have the big Carl from Germany. We've had this still for about 2 years, so a lot of the whiskey mashes have gone through that. Most stuff has been barreled as recently as the last 2 weeks, but we've also been using several different stills to find a flavor profile for our whiskeys that'll be coming out. So we have several different barrels throughout the building. We have some new American oak that has different kind of char levels from 1 to 4, 4 being a heavier char. So we do have some barrels that will allow bourbon, from new American oak, new charred American oak, 51% corn. So we will have some bourbon by definition. Then we have other barrels. We have some French barrels, and then some other barrels from people around town, some local breweries we've done some stuff with. We've got the Hub Brewery, who are doing a whiskey for them. We're aging some whiskey in their barrels that they had done stout in. So that should be coming along soon too.
Okay, and all the barrels are here?
All the barrels are right here in this building. Yes, for New Deal for right now. And PDX is the Portland symbol, so yeah, distillery will all get together again, and the distillers they're all working together to develop the whiskey here in Oregon. So this is a cool project done by them. I have a cool barrel back here too.
Toujours dans le même secteur, je me dirige maintenant vers Stone Barn. C'est une des distilleries les plus modestes des États-Unis, ce qui ne les empêche pas d'être créatifs dans leur gamme et dans leur choix de finition de maturation. Stone Barn présente une gamme très impressionnante d'alcools différents.
We are at Stone Barn Brandy Works, small, perhaps the smallest distillery in the U.S. I think we might have one up in the San Juan Islands that is comparable, but we are a very small distillery in southeast Portland, Oregon. We do brandies, and we do fruit-based liqueurs, and we do whiskeys, we do ouzo, and we do grappa.
Okay, and can you tell me more about your 3 different whiskies?
Yes, we do an unbarreled oat whiskey, and we source from Bob's Red Mill, which is an employee-owned company based in Oregon. We do not barrel that product and that spirit. We make also an unaged rye whiskey, Bob's Red Mill rye flour from Saskatchewan, and they are both 80 proof. They're both, very clean, very pure, no hangovers. We make our cuts very carefully, and it's the heart of the first distillation. Then we make an aged whiskey also, and we do straight rye, straight oat, straight spelt, and we also do various blends. We use a recipe which calls for liquid enzymes, so we don't need a malt. But we do use malt for some flavoring, and we have some aging with a chocolate malt and some with some barley malt. And we've had several treatments on our barrels. We've had toasted barrels. So far, all that we've released that's aged sufficiently has been from toasted barrels, but we've moved to a charred barrel to see if we get a smokier flavor. And haven't tried that yet. We are doing some interesting things spurred on by our employee, Andy Garrison, and he connected with a local brewer to get a barrel that had been a bourbon barrel that he makes a cherry Adam beer. And we are finishing our rye whiskey in that beer barrel, which had a lot of the cherries still in the barrel. So we're looking at partnerships like that and ways of finishing a spirit that's already been aged.
Si vous trouvez un jour, sur une bouteille, le terme de double maturation, c'est que le whisky a séjourné dans 2 tonneaux différents avant d'être mis en bouteille. Par exemple, on peut laisser vieillir pendant 3 ans un alcool dans un tonneau de chêne, puis le laisser vieillir 1 an dans un fût ayant servi à contenir du sherry, connu aussi sous le nom de Xérès, qui est un vin blanc espagnol, parfois fortifié avec de l'eau-de-vie pure et qui mature en fût de chêne. Ce sont ces fûts, une fois vidés, qui servent à la maturation du whisky, et qui vont lui donner un goût plus sucré et parfois fruité, et lui donner une belle coloration rouge cuivrée. On parle aussi d'affinage pour désigner cette technique de double maturation. Traversons à présent la rivière Willamette pour aller dans le quartier nord-ouest de Portland, découvrir une distillerie plus importante que les autres, Clear Creek. Cette distillerie est connue mondialement pour son whisky McCarthy's Oregon Single Malt. Ouverte en 1986, cette distillerie appartient à la première vague de micro-distilleries fondées aux USA. On y utilise de l'orge tourbée importée d'Écosse. On peut comparer le McCarthy's au Lagavulin. Il est tourbé et plein de saveurs d'agrumes. C'est un des seuls whiskies d'Oregon qui s'importe en Europe, malgré la très faible quantité de bouteilles fabriquées.
These guys definitely fall into a little bit more of like the traditional grapple world. This is our McCarthy's single malt whiskey. It is a lot like a Scotch from Islay. It's very peaty, it's very smoky. We actually get our imported peat barley sent over to us from Scotland. And then once it gets here, we send it over to a brewery across the river. The brewery will make the wash for us. We get that back here. We throw it into the still. And then we age it for 3 years in Oregon white oak.
Okay, how many stills do you have?
We have 4. We got them at all different times. So they're all a little bit different age, but they're all from Germany. They're all copper pot stills, and they're amazing and beautiful.
Okay, and how many bottles do you make a year?
We're around 10,000 cases in production right now.
Le soir tombe sur Portland, et il est maintenant temps pour moi d'aller me réchauffer dans un bar. Mon choix se portera sur cette brasserie Rogue, très chaleureuse. Rogue est une distillerie d'Oregon qui se situe à Newport. Leur Dead Guy Whiskey est un whisky jeune, fougueux et léger. Parfait pour terminer mon voyage à Portland. Les micro-distilleries sont un phénomène nouveau dans le monde du whisky. Elles prennent de plus en plus d'importance et les consommateurs s'intéressent de plus en plus à ces alcools handcrafted, littéralement fait main. Je retiendrai de ce voyage que, contrairement aux idées reçues, les États-Unis ne produisent pas que du Bourbon, mais sont capables de faire des whiskies tous très différents et plus originaux les uns que les autres.
Said, come on now, if you said goodbye, my soul will cry out. If you stay with me, my spirit will soar. Inside the wall, inside the time, a lot of people